I've been a fan of Haro bikes since I was a kid. Watching the likes of Dave Mira and Ryan Nyquist dominate the BMX scene on their Haros will forever be burned into my brain. And so you can imagine how stoked I was when I found out that BikesOnline was going to start carrying the Haro Saguaro 2, an aggressive hardtail with 140 millimeters of front suspension. But BMX bikes and mountain bikes are pretty dang different. And I was curious to see how Haro's most recent foray into the world of knobby tire bikes was gonna go. But after logging dozens of miles on the new Saro, I think it's safe to say that they've pulled it off. So why don't we step outside into the dreary winter weather, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the bike, my experience riding it, and who I'd recommend it for. The Haro Saguaro is built around an aluminum frame that's both lightweight and durable. Now, if you know anything about hardtails, you know that the aluminum variety can sometimes get a bad reputation for being excessively harsh. But thankfully, that wasn't the case here. Saro tracked the ground nicely and never felt excessively stiff or uncomfortable, even on technical climbs or over braking bumps. I was also happy to find that the bike is UDH compatible, so you could upgrade this to a full-on SRAM T-type drivetrain should you choose to. It also has all the other modern amenities you'd expect to find on a bike of this caliber, such as internal cable routing and various mounting points for tools and water bottles in the front triangle. The Saguaro's geometry is clearly pointed towards riders who prioritize riding more aggressive terrain at speed. It's highlighted by its slack 64.5-degree head tube angle. At the back of the bike are some relatively long, at least for a hardtail, 435mm chainstays. Rounding out the modern long, low, and slack trifecta is a super low bottom bracket. As we'll talk about in a little bit, that does make this bike a bit less poppy or playful than you typically think of hardtails as being, but on the flip side, it makes it super stable and composed. And if there ever was a hardtail that could whoop up on some full suspension bikes, I think this would be the one to do it. While we're on the subject of geometry, the size large Saguaro that I tested comes with 29-inch wheels front and rear, but the small gets a 27.5-inch wheel in the back for better rider fit. Next, let's talk components. The Saguaro that I tested is the mid-tier Saguaro 2. It gets a 12-speed SRAM NX drivetrain with an 11 to 50 tooth cassette in the back. This offers a wide range of gears for both climbing and descending, something I really appreciated on the steep enduro trails I was testing the bike on. Stopping power comes from a pair of TRP Slate Evo brakes. I've ridden these on a few different bikes and have always been impressed by their premium feel and predictable performance. They seem to be like a great fit for the Saguaro's aggressive temperament. At the front of the bike is a 140mm Marzocchi Bomber Z2. And honestly, I was super impressed with this thing. It's super supple at the top, but also offered a good bit of bottom out resistance. Felt like a much more premium fork than you'd expect on a bike at this price. The sweep compression adjustment can also be used to quickly add tons of support while climbing less technical terrain or playing around in a pump track, which is another great perk. One last highlight for me with this build kit were the WTB KOM wheels. The rims were relatively lightweight and held up to all the abuse I threw at it, but my favorite thing was this rear hub, which has a pretty dang high engagement, which again, is not something you typically find on a bike that costs less than $2,000. This makes ratcheting your pedals through technical climbs or sprinting out of berms so much more enjoyable. These wheels were wrapped in a pair of 2.4-inch Kenda tires with a Navigal Pro in the back and a Pinner Pro up front. This combination of a knobby, grippy tire up front with a lighter, faster rolling one in the rear is perfect for hardtails and trail bikes. It's what I run on my own bike, and I was happy to see it come on the Saguaro. All in all, that puts the weight of my size large test bike, set up tubeless and without pedals, at 33.4 pounds or 15.1 kilograms, which honestly isn't too bad for such a burly bike. So clearly the Haro Saguaro 2 has all the right bits and pieces to be a competent mountain bike, but that doesn't really mean much if it's not fun on the trail. And thankfully, like I alluded to at the beginning of the video, that is not the case with the Saguaro. Let's go ahead and start with the climbs. First, let's state the obvious. The Saguaro is a hardtail, which means it does a great job at sending all of your power straight to the ground. And if you're used to climbing longer travel full suspension bikes, this improved efficiency is immediately noticeable. What's less obvious though is how well the bike did on more technical terrain. Even with that slack front end and long wheelbase, it still felt really maneuverable, and the front wheel wasn't as prone to wandering as I would have expected. I think a lot of this comes down to the steep 76.5-degree seat tube angle, which puts you in a great position, keeping your weight centered over the bottom bracket, which helps maintain traction on steep loose climbs. The fast-rolling Kenda tires and the wide range of that NX 11 to 50 tooth cassette were also really appreciated here. Overall, I gotta say I was impressed by how well the Saguaro did on the climbs, especially for a bike that's clearly prioritizing the more fun part of mountain biking, which is of course the descents. Here, the slack 66.5-degree head tube angle, aggressive components, and surprisingly supple frame inspired confidence to tackle steep, technical terrain at speed. The Bomber Z2 fork did a great job of ironing out the smaller bumps and rocks, while still offering plenty of support on bigger features. I did end up adding one more volume spacer to make that fork a bit more progressive than it comes stock, which was nice at my slightly heavier weight. Just as with the climbs, another big highlight here for me were those Kenda tires. This was actually my first time riding anything from Kenda, and I was impressed by the excellent traction of the Pinner Pro up front. Cornering was probably where the Saguaro shined most. The super low bottom bracket gave it a stable, grounded feel, really allowing you to drive through hard berms and flat corners alike. It's one of the bikes that makes you want to push harder and ride faster, and thankfully, the TRP brakes were there when I went a bit too far. I honestly had a blast taking that thing on trails that I'd usually reserve for longer travel full suspension bikes. To be honest, that's probably the biggest compliment that I can give it. I was continually impressed by the amount of speed this bike could carry, both up and down the trail. And I'm serious when I say that I genuinely think that it could be faster than a lot of full suspension trail bikes with the right rider. But we can't wrap up this review without talking about one final criteria. This is a BMX brand after all, so of course, we've got to talk about jumping. Sadly, I did not get to do nearly as much of this as I wanted to while I had the bike. As you can see, there's a lot of snow, which means most of our local jump lines are covered in it. But I did get to have some fun throwing it off of some side hits on the trails, and I can say that while it's not the most poppy bike ever, again, that lower bottom bracket and slightly longer rear end makes it like to hug the ground a bit more. Once you do get the bike in the air, it's extremely stable and forgiving, which is something that I appreciate, and especially folks who come from a full suspension bike onto a hardtail, they're gonna like that too. One type of terrain that I think this bike would really excel on are high-speed bike park style jumps. Again, that stable geometry mixed with 140 millimeters of travel up front and that strong frame would really make it shine there, and hopefully be able to take this thing out and give it a test at the bike park this summer. So if you want to see me take a hardtail to the bike park, then you know what to do. Let me know in the comments. So who is the Haro Saguaro for? Well, if you're looking for the absolute lightest bike to go race cross country on, or you want something that's going to feel like a BMX bike at your local dirt jumps, then it's probably not going to be the one for you. But if you like doing aggressive, high-speed trail riding, again, something that you'd maybe typically reserve for a full suspension bike, but you're looking to either save some money or don't want to worry about the maintenance hassles of all those pivots and linkages, then the Saguaro really can't be beat. And I mean that for those of you who have written off hardtails in the past. Hardtails have come a long way in the last 5 or so years, and bikes like the Saguaro really are proof of just how good they are these days. So yes, I think it's safe to say that Haro was definitely able to make a successful reintroduction into the world of mountain bikes. And we at BikesOnline are stoked to have the Haro Saguaro 2 in stock and at an incredible price. I've got a link to check that out down there in the description. Now, we've talked a lot about full suspension bikes here in this video so far. If you are more interested in a squishy bike, we've got those for you too. One of our best sellers is the Polygon Siskiyou T8. We've done tons of content on that, so if you want to check that out now, we'll leave that up here somewhere on the screen. Before you get out of here, go ahead and be sure to like this video, subscribe to the BikesOnline channel, and after you've done that, grab your bike, whatever it is, get out there and get ripping.